What is going on, guys? Hockey Guy 1 here. Welcome to my review of Star Wars A New Hope. So Star Wars A New Hope is directed by George Lucas and stars Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, Alec Guinness, James Earl Jones, Anthony Daniels, Kenny Baker, and Peter Cushing. So the story is about the rebels who have these Death Star plans, so they're being chased by the Empire to try to retrieve them back, like from R2-D2 and all the rebels, and pretty much just as well as the process, Princess Leia does kind of get captured. So all our main characters, Luke, Han, Obi-Wan, and pretty much most of our main characters are trying to go out to save Princess Leia from Senate, and basically then just try to destroy the Death Star before it destroys the rebel base, pretty much. The story is very good. I mean, there is definitely a lot to it. I mean, it definitely relies on the structure, because there is a lot put into it, but I think they did a good job at keeping one consistent story, even with all of the things that are placed on top of each other, which I do really like how they end up crafting out a story like this. I mean, it's pretty much groundbreaking for the time. I mean, you don't really see much of this before this movie, and it's pretty much just like a sci-fi movie that has a lot to it, but they do a good job at keeping one consistent story throughout, and just really trying with it. Structure is very good. It kind of starts out with the first act, which is pretty much where Darth Vader crashes the rebel ship to try to get the Death Star plans back, but then R2-D2 and C-3PO kind of like get down to Tatooine and escape from there, and then they kind of like run into Luke as they are end up being sold to them, and it's pretty much just more about that place. And the second act kind of where it kind of gets on, it kind of where like they start to meet Obi-Wan and all of the Cantina stuff, and then they end up going on to that whole mission to try and find Princess Leia because of all the run destruction, basically. And then there's kind of the third act where they go back to the rebel base, but we're being tracked by the whole Empire. So it's pretty much like a whole race against time to try and destroy the Death Star before the Death Star destroys the rebel base. And it's pretty much just, it's pretty good. I mean, I like how the structure is done. I mean, it's pretty much just each act just really connects with each other and to help create a consistent story, which is really impressive because of like how different each act is. They're able to keep one consistent story throughout kind of different events. Pacing is very good. I mean, this movie is a little over 2 hours long, and it definitely feels like it's shorter than that, to be honest. I mean, in this movie, this kind of goes by pretty fast. It's like really a fun movie, and it also has a bunch of scenes that really connect with each other, and each scene really does feel connected, which is what makes this movie feel engaging and really feel like it doesn't get boring ever. I mean, and I really like how they do that, and it's pretty impressive that each scene really connected. Luke Skywalker as our main protagonist is very good. I mean, and there is definitely a lot of character growth and development to this character. And he kind of starts out as this boy on a farm with his aunt and uncle. They end up dying, which is pretty much one of many sad events that are going to happen in this trilogy with him. But anyways, like what they do is just really do a good job with growing his character from like a farm boy into like destroying the Death Star. I mean, that's like huge growth for him, and they definitely do a good job throughout this movie growing with him. I mean, there are many scenes kind of showing him being as a Jedi with Obi-Wan and trying to like learn more about the Force, and then just the whole Death Star moment when Obi-Wan says, "Use the Force, Luke," and ends up using the Force to destroy the Death Star. It's just huge growth for him from that original state of living on a farm or on Tatooine, basically. And it's just very good development and is what makes him such a strong protagonist. Unsolo does have some character development even. I mean, for most of this movie, he is pretty much cocky and was pretty much just wants to do everything because he wants the money. So he just pretty much does everything for them for that. But over time, this movie, his character growth is like very impressive. I mean, by the end of the movie, he decides to end up saving Luke from the Imperial during the Death Star thing, and I really like how they do that. I mean, it just shows how much his character went from about this movie, and it just really shows her how he just cared about himself at first, but then he started caring for other people, which is something like you didn't really expect, and it kind of came out of nowhere, and they did a good job with that development. Princess Leia is pretty much portrayed as a damsel in distress for a lot of this movie. I mean, she's pretty much just relying on other people to save her, which is pretty much just how women were portrayed in sci-fi movies at the time, so it kind of makes sense for the way this is going, and it's fine for what it is. I mean, she is a pretty good character in that kind of case, but there are times where she like actually stands up for herself after she got saved. That kind of proves that she's more than just a damsel in distress, which is kind of what I like about her character, and they do a good job in kind of that development after she gets rescued, and kind of shows how she's kind of just this princess at the top of the row. Later says a lot of this movie. Obi-Wan is like this mentor figure, is pretty good in this movie. I mean, they do a pretty good job with his character, as it's pretty much he's trying to help Luke and guide him through the ways of the Force and trying to help him learn more about the Force, and at least as much as he can. And so he is pretty much just teaching him some ways of the Force and how to use it, and that's pretty much his character for this movie is as a mentor. And even him sacrifice, I mean, that's something I can definitely appreciate. That's something I didn't really like that much for is, I mean, that sacrifice is just really powerful. That's how he sacrifices himself so Luke can escape. Is what makes him such a powerful sacrifice, and it's just makes him a pretty good character. R2-D2 and C-3PO are pretty much just the comic reliefs of this movie, and they're pretty good as that. I mean, they're pretty much these lovable characters that they pretty much just distract you from what's going on, and I like that. I mean, they pretty much work as comic reliefs, as at times there are jokes that they can use that work, I mean, and then they are even at the right times, and I just really like them as these comic relief characters for kids to love, and it's what really helps them out. Darth Vader is a very good villain. This might be like the weakest character of him, but he's still like very good in this movie. I mean, he's still very intimidating, as you do kind of see him choke his own guy at one time, and it's just because he wasn't really like that they're saying that much, and that kind of makes him pretty intimidating. And even when he like goes into the rebel ship and kind of kills some rebels and like chokes the captain to death, I mean, that was pretty intimidating. And then when he ended up killing Obi-Wan, kind of makes him feel intimidating. It's what makes him like such a good villain in this movie, despite the fact that this is his weakest character in the whole trilogy. The acting in this movie is very good. I mean, you got Mark Hamill, who just really feels like the character. I mean, this is pretty much the start of pretty much one of his most iconic characters, and he just really works in this role, as he does really try in his role. He looks like he wants to be there. His delivery is on point for pretty much most of the scenes, at least. And then there's Carrie Fisher, who also did a very good job as Princess Leia. Does really feel like her character. And then Harrison Ford, of course, is great. I mean, he barely ever is bad in any of his roles, and this movie is definitely I mean, his delivery just is on point and really feels like Han Solo. James Earl Jones pretty much debuted as Darth Vader, as this is his iconic role, and he's just great in this role. His voice acting, at least, is just very good. I mean, and he really does feel like the character whenever he delivers a line, and does do a very good job kind of using an evil voice. And then there's Alec Guinness, who's is Obi-Wan, and he does really try in his role even, and he does really feel like he wanted to be there and tried in his role. Visual effects are very good. I mean, they use practical effects which still hold up nowadays. I mean, this movie really still feels like a modern movie with the visuals. I mean, it's pretty surprising how well they have aged. I mean, this movie came out in like 1977, and these practical effects still hold up. I mean, you just look at like the Death Star explosion and the explosion of Alderaan. I mean, those still look very good to this day, and it's just really impressive how it still looks. I mean, just the whole looks of the Death Star is obviously all used practical, and it's just very good and still looks pretty convincing to this day. And every scene in space even still looks very convincing to this day, and they've done a very good job with it. Cinematography is very good. Each camera angle really works. I mean, just kind of looking at the whole rebel attack on the Death Star kind of thing is what really helps for the cinematography. I mean, that has like a lot of camera angles in that scene especially, and that each one for that scene just really works out well. I mean, you know, it shows the whole landscape of the scene many times, and it even does kind of show a bunch of things going on, and it's just very impressive how each camera angle can look that good. I mean, they do a good job with most camera angles in this movie, as each time they use a close-up, it makes sense, it works, it's in a normal emotional time, and then the whole wideouts kind of is also, there's also a lot of those, as it does show landscape many times, and they do a very good job with this, and it is very impressive how good the cinematography is, as each camera angle, at least for the most part, it really works out. Lighting is great. I mean, for like each scene, there's enough lighting that you can see it. Like, for example, when they're in space, they do use enough lighting that you can really see what's going on, but also keeping it dark enough so it kind of gives the landscape of being in space. So they did a pretty good job with that. So, and then pretty much every scene, it is pretty lit well, and they do a good job with it for the most part. The designs are pretty good. I mean, the whole set design on Tatooine, like the place where Luke lives, and Mos Eisley, in all those places were actually filmed on sets, and they look really good. I mean, and it's just very impressive, the designs of these sets. I mean, pretty much landscapes, a whole sand down it, and I really like how they do that. I mean, and I like how it looks, and it just pretty much works for this movie and the scenes especially, and it just really is kind of cool how they built the town at the same, and to try to show how this planet is. So I think it really works for it. That said, I do have one small negative of this movie, and it's kind of that, like, the Obi-Wan Darth Vader lightsaber duel. I mean, while I did say I can applaud it for the kind of emotion that it can send, but at the same time, if you kind of look at it at an action standpoint, it doesn't really age that well. I mean, it's really nothing special. I definitely think they could have done better with it, because it's really just whack, 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 dead, and that's pretty much all it is. I mean, I think they definitely could have done better with it. And something else that I can kind of nitpick about the scene is that there's kind of a bit choppy editing in that scene, but that's really the only part of this movie where there's choppy editing in this movie, so I could say that as well. Overall, Star Wars A New Hope is a revolutionary film to the sci-fi genre and is a classic. So I'm going to give Star Wars A New Hope a 9.5 out of 10. That was my review of Star Wars A New Hope. What are your thoughts on Star Wars A New Hope? Tell me in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.